A hallucinogen is a drug that causes hallucinations, obviously. Sensations and imagery that seem like they're real, but they're not. Um, there are two types of hallucinogens. First is a classic hallucinogen, and it causes your typical auditory and sensory and imagery hallucinations. The second is a dissociative hallucinogen, and that causes the user to feel disconnected with their body. Most people actually associate this group of chemicals with drugs, like street drugs, because the popularity of them, and it's why that popularity is why we don't use them as actual medical drugs like they were intended for. In the 1940s, the discovery of LSD led to its development as a potential treatment for mental illnesses. By the 1960s, that drug had gotten out on the streets and was widely abused and stigmatized, and as a result, that drug was put on the controlled substances list. And now it's really hard to get a hold of, and it kind of stopped all research for mental illnesses and the use of hallucinogens as a treatment. Hallucinogens were actually really commonly used in earlier cultures, such as the early Azteca and Native American cultures, but they played a large role in spirituality and religion. They used them to feel more connected with their gods and their higher powers. Let's talk about common hallucinogens and how they're used. First, we're going to talk about the classic hallucinogens. Some of these you're probably going to know, some of them you may not. LSD, which is lysergic acid diethylamide, which is one of probably the most powerful and most famous hallucinogens. It's also known as acid or tabs. Next, we're going to talk about psilocybin, which is going to come into play here later on, and that comes from mushrooms. So if you've ever heard of magic mushrooms or shrooms, that's psilocybin acting. Peyote, which comes from a cactus, but it can also be made to be synthetic. Additionally, there's DMT, which is a chemical that's found in plants, and you can use it to make tea, it can be made in a lab, or it can be dried out and smoked. Now here's a list of dissociative drugs. First, PCP, which is an extremely common one, and these dissociative drugs, are actually what we kind of used. We use them in medicine often. So PCP was originally developed in the 1950s as a general anesthetic for surgery. It's no longer used because it turns out there's serious side effects. It's found in various forms, and sometimes referred to as angel dust, hog, love boat, and the peace pill. Ketamine was used in surgery, is used as a surgery anesthetic for animals and humans. They still use it to this day, and EMS providers also use it. There's a protocol called excited delirium, which is essentially that says that you can use ketamine to sedate a individual if they are in a state of delirium. It's now also sold on the streets as a powder and pills, but it can be injectable. It's commonly used in EMS, like I said. It's also known as Special K and Cat Valium. Here's one that you've probably had. Yeah, that's right, I said that. One that you've probably had. Dextromethorphan, also known as DM, also known as Mucinex DM. It's a cough suppressant, and when you take too much of it, it can be a dissociative drug, aka lean and DXM. At this point in time, I'd like to tell you, don't go take a bunch of cough medicine, please. It's not a good idea. Lastly, we're going to talk about salvia. Salvia comes from plants and is typically ingested by chewing on the leaves and then drinking the juices. But it can also be smoked or vaporized. And we know that these drugs alter the brain. Specifically, they alter mood, thought processes, perception, experience of the self, and more. And it's fascinating to me that, there's these chemicals that can interrupt these communication lines in the brain and cause all of this crazy stuff. I mean, I've never tripped on acid, but I've heard plenty of testimonials, and it's crazy. It sounds bizarre, and it's actually a huge reference in pop culture. Um, and it would be amazing to see any of this be used as a potential drug. I guess we'll find out if it can be.